Hi guys, it's Anya from Interior Design Hub back again today with another video. And today I am super excited. We are going to go over interior design trends that are timeless and how do we achieve a timeless design style. So when we think of timeless design or classic design trends, I feel like you think of maybe more traditional styles and things that maybe you go, but that's not really going to fit in with like what I like. And that is definitely a misconception. I find that when you want to do timeless design, the key to timeless design is actually to take foundational principles. So have a certain backdrop that's really easy to intermix current trends. And what I mean by this is when you have a neutral backdrop, a neutral color palette, say hot pink is super on trend, well then you're gonna bring in little touches of that into an existing very classic backdrop. And what this means is that your design style or the design trends, you can either be very current on trends without basically having to revamp your whole space, or you can keep your space in a more classic traditional look with the neutral kind of foundational pieces and not really speak to any trends. So whether you're a trendsetter or whether you're more about keeping that timeless look indefinitely, either way, these tips will help you achieve whatever style you're after. All right. Let's dive in. So one of the most classic design trends, and I feel like sometimes you will hear kind of it's in, it's out, it's this and that. It's always been a classic design trend, and that is a white kitchen. Now you're probably thinking, are you kidding me? Like white was so on trend. Well, I feel like anything, certain things are more popular at certain times. But from a foundational standpoint, a white kitchen will never fail. Don't get me wrong, I love the deep forest green kitchens that I'm seeing right now, but I know in 5-10 years, that style is not going to be in anymore. And as some people may or may not know, a kitchen can be very costly to do. I mean, you can look at anywhere from, maybe doing on the cheap end, like an IKEA kitchen around maybe the $15,000 mark for like a smaller kitchen, maybe less. It depends on where you live really, but it can range right up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. So when you're thinking about doing something like a kitchen, something that's going to be a real foundational part of your home, which, you know what, that's a big part of it too, right? Like that's not structural, but that's a very costly fix to change a kitchen or to upgrade a kitchen. Even spraying cabinets and doing that kind of things to change color is still costly, time consuming, and a big giant pain in the butt. So as much as I love the look of those kitchens and I love that trend of like the beautiful colored kitchens, it's not a trend that I would ever feel comfortable for myself. Because unless you have a lot of disposable income to maybe flip it around in, maybe 10 years or so, maybe less, I feel like it could be overwhelming when you get to a point that you're no longer into that particular design style. And the cost could be prohibitive to do it again and again. And again, that's not super sustainable. And I'm all about doing as sustainable as possible. So let's go back to why a white kitchen is a classic design sense. White is one of those things that you will be able to manipulate if you really want to be on trend. And how do you go about doing this? Let's say you have a white kitchen and you were really into that farmhouse trend. So you have all those cool like farmhouse knobs, and you maybe have a shaker style cabinet, which is a cool cabinet. I think it's pretty classic. You're good with that. And now you're like, I'm really not into that farmhouse look anymore, but I've got this white kitchen with all these, very country kitschy knobs. Well, what do? You change the knobs. Now that's going to cost you not that much money. And you can really change the look of a kitchen by just changing the hardware. So say you're really into the brass and the gold, which is another trend thing. It comes and it goes. So you could remove those knobs and change them to a more simple, modern, gold knob, and the gold with the white looks great. Or maybe you want to do more of a contrast or a Hollywood glam style. So maybe you do more of a metallic knob, or maybe you do a black, so you have that black and white contrast. So there are ways of achieving a different look, but your foundational piece, the cabinets themselves, they're timeless. And you can change the look through your knobs, you can change the look through accessories, the way that you style your space, the type of pieces that you put on. Say you have an island and maybe you have a metallic vase that you put out, or you have some bits of color through your different pieces or golds. You can really bring in and totally transform a white kitchen from one current trend to another trend. But what's nice is maybe you drop $1,000 in accessories or a couple $1,000s in new hardware, depending on how big your kitchen is. But you're not spending tens and thousands of dollars of actually redoing your cabinetry. And I think that's one of the really big takeaways with classic design is you can keep something that will grow with you instead of holding you back and making you feel like, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming for me. And that's a really big part of it. And then the other side of that, if you're not into trends at all and you're like, I don't care about whatever's on trend, I just want a classic look, then doing something like a white cabinet with something that isn't super on trend. So you're just using a classic. So a brushed nickel handle, something simple and sleek and just beautiful and demure, maybe not super one style or another. It's almost just any style. It's more transitional. That's where you're going to want to draw that inspiration from and do that. And then you're never having to change those things out, because it doesn't matter what period you're in, it always looks current because it's classic. And I think, sometimes when you see those super high design, super high end residential interiors, that's a theme that you notice pretty consistently, no matter what era the house was built, is a very neutral, clean, often a lot of white or creams in their color palette, and that's very intentional. And that moves into continuing with that classic theme is white paint. So we talked about a white kitchen, and you're gonna see there's a theme about white. So white in general is classic. It's not even technically a color. I mean, white is one of those things that have no time frame on it. You will see white in any style, not just year or era, but whether you're doing boho or you're doing minimalism or maximalism or Hollywood glam or Scandinavian style or Japandi style or grand millennial style, it doesn't really matter what design style you have or don't have. When you use white, you can use white with everything. And that's what makes it classic. White is the foundation for anything else you want to throw at it. So what's nice is back to that person who doesn't really want to focus on a trend. So you're thinking whites and naturals and vanillas and creams and just natural hues and inspiration from environment. So, wool rugs or jute rugs and that soft, linen fabrics, whether it's fitted or loose, like all of those very natural textiles and natural color ways is really how to do a classic design style that's not any particular style. And if you do love being on trend with whatever is super, super current, then you're bringing that in. So you have classic pieces that are nicely tailored, and you might have a big sectional sofa that is in a beautiful, cream or maybe even a light gray, like nothing outlandish in looks or colors. You're not going with like something like velvet or whatever. You're going with that basic kind of silhouette and that basic color palette, whether it's white, creams, natural materials, but then you're bringing in the trend. So let's say forest green is super on trend. Well, you might want to add some cool forest green velvet throw pillows, and maybe you want to add even some metallic details in there if you want to do that Hollywood glam, or maybe you're going to get some really bright, super funky artwork that you're going to put on the wall behind it with a super bold frame or a bold photo or print. Or if you're really wanting to add, you know, some of that Hollywood glam, let's say, and you want some of those metallic finishes, so maybe the coffee table that's a couple $100, you would change out into more of that look. So what you're trying to do is really these expensive pieces, the pieces that you kind of want to invest for a longer period of time, can be easily manipulated to whatever design trend or design style you're looking for. So if you're looking to do something more traditional, you're adding in those traditional elements in way of accent pieces. But if you're looking to do something more modern or minimalist, you're just removing those pieces. But the basic foundational piece, so in this case a couch, would still be in that neutral palette, or the walls would be in that neutral palette. So you're just layering on top. And another area when you have that white or that neutral colorway as your backdrop in your palette, in your finishes and your paints, is you would bring in something like a really bold, beautiful, you know, fabric in your draperies, or you keep it neutral for more minimalism. So there's ways to really shift that perceived look of a space just by changing out the accent pieces. So white and neutrals, that color palette will last you the test of time. And honestly, like, I don't know about you, but like painting is such a pain in the butt. So I don't want to paint my space every few years to like be up on the current trend. Now, if you love painting, go for it. I'm just one of those people that I'm like, I kind of don't want to have to do that all the time. So, or I don't want to pay somebody. If you're willing to pay somebody, I mean, it gets expensive. So there's all these little things. So when you have that really good neutral backdrop, it's so much easier to make simple changes and really fully change the feeling of your space. The point of changing the feeling of that space is what gives it that classic and timeless look. So classic and timeless can be a design style in the sense of you don't necessarily have to do any of that if you keep things more neutral and clean, but you can, which is nice. I feel like classic design style is what's the best part about it, is you don't have to keep it that way forever. You can decide after a couple years, you know what, I really love this boho trend and I want to add some more of that layering and that textures, and you can add that in on top of it, but you're not taking away from that base. And I think that's the key to any design style, really, is to have a really good classic base and then build on it. And I'm not saying don't do the bright couch and don't do the fun colors and don't do all that stuff, but today is really more about that classic style, that timeless style, or that timeless base that you can then change and manipulate or keep consistent and never really fall into that, you know, trend area. What's interesting too about a classic design palette is that sometimes people, and I will do a video on this, ask about, well, how do I mix and match design styles? And really, this is a big part of that, is having this classic base and having this timeless underlay to whatever style you want. Because what happens when you keep things classic is that you can add and layer different types of design styles together, and you know, you can go like a boho minimalist or a Scandinavian traditional, and you're adding that in through ways of accents, accessories, colors, lack of pictures, all of those things to bring those styles in. But that's where that classic base and that classic style will carry you through whatever style you happen to have. So I've already touched on this a little bit, but another way to have a very classic and timeless look to your space is to really use natural materials. So that includes using pieces that have, you know, rattans and wickers and natural woods, and even mixing different woods. Having, you know, jute rugs and wool rugs and sisal rugs, like all of those natural materials in that, again, very neutral, natural color palette, is really the way to achieve a classic design style. And by bringing in natural materials into your space, it also avoids having too much of a sterile feel to it, which sometimes when you use too much white, that can kind of be a risk. So you do want to layer in some of these natural tones and natural materials in order to really complement that neutral backdrop, but give it warmth and texture and depth. And I feel like I've brought this up in so many videos, but layering and building those things on top of each other gives a really good foundation for a classic design look that is timeless and will not go out of style. And then again, you can change and add into it as you need. But using those natural materials is really going to take a look that could be too bland and making it feel good. And that's what you see in a lot of those higher end, design finishes when you watch, when you look through a magazine or you're scrolling the internet for inspiration and you're looking at these high-end homes that you're like, wow, I can't believe that's from, the 70s or the 80s or the 90s, and it still looks really good today, because you do see spaces like that. And you'll see a common theme, whites, linens, vanillas, creams, very neutral, natural color palette. And then, that can be easily manipulated. So I think the key takeaway today to create a classic and timeless look is that it is very easy to achieve. And by keeping things neutral, keeping things natural, and emphasizing clean lines and shapes, and also, highlighting your home's natural architectural details. So say you have beams, all that kind of stuff. And just keeping it very consistent and neutral is really what's going to get you that classic, timeless look to your space. One other detail, and if you're kind of starting from scratch, this is a great, little tidbit, is using natural finishes within your space. So if you're able to, or if you're making changes to your space, think of using natural materials like in your flooring. So wood flooring or reclaimed wood flooring, or, stones and brick and all those natural things. Like, that's also going to add to that timeless feeling. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you have any questions or comments, please ask me below, and don't forget to smash the like button. Until next time, bye.